Now, in lecture 3 and lectures 4 are about deconcentrations of power. No. Okay, all right. I can move it. All right. So in this lecture, we're going to talk about why we have to, what's the problem with concentrations of power, of state power, and how deconcentration power can be done through separation of power and division of power. And in separation of power, we would focus only on the relationship between the executive and the legislative branches, because judiciary will be dealt with in lecture 7. And for the separations of power, we focus on presidentialism and parliamentarianism. There are other systems which I leave in extra serving at the back. So if you're interested, you can have a look. And in parliamentarianism, a government must enjoy the confidence of the parliament. Otherwise, you have to resign or seek a new elections. More than in presidentialism, parliamentarianism requires cohesive parties. Frequent or patronage-induced crossover or hopping of lawmakers can cause instability and undermine parliamentary democracy. So we're going to look at this. That is this is the conception map. Sorry. This is a conception map. The blue one is what we're going to cover. And division of labor, we will cover divisions of power. We will cover that in lecture 4 after this. And judiciary independence will be in lecture 7. Political parties will touch a bit on lecture 6. Deconcentration of power. This is a country called Burundi in West Africa, next to Kenya. So Burundi and its neighbor, Rwanda, both have experienced terrible genocide in the 90s and continue on. And what you find that this was their past, and this was Burundi in year 2020. They queue up to vote. Now, this doesn't mean that democracy was a bed of roses. Democratization continued to have issues in countries like Burundi and Uganda. However, when something is clear is that unlike the past, where people get killed, democracy offers a better way to resolve political issues. Instead of chopping off heads, it's counting heads. And do not think that people are true only towards outsiders, the ethnic others. People can be very cruel to their own. The Ottoman Empire is famous for fratricides. New sultans often have his brothers executed because he did not want challenges coming from his siblings. And the same thing you can find in some other civilization like China. But China has some things going even further. When someone lost in a political struggle, not only the person get killed, often his whole clan get eliminated. And this lasted for about 2,500 years. Now, why would people actually take part in politics when their cost is so high? It's exactly because that the power is so concentrated, people get tempted to go in, and those who are already in power felt that they need to do everything to stop the challenges. So this is the first reason. This is the first reason why concentrations of power is bad, and why we, in order to achieve peace, we need to deconcentrate power. Second reason is to offer checks and balance, as in the famous words of Lord Acton, power tends to corrupt and absolute powers corrupt absolutely. To have different agency doing different things is something that you can trace back all the way to the Roman Republic. But the modern idea of separation of powers with an executive branch, a legislative branch, and a judicial branch. This is something often attributed to a French philosopher in the 18th century, Baron de Montesquieu. How do we deconcentrate power of the state so that it will be spread around and not overly monopolized by one or small group of people? There are two ways to do about it. One is separations of power, and that's what we normally talk about, legislative, executive, and judicial. And the second one is divisions of power. We look at government as different layer. You have national, provincial, municipal. But this is, of course, that if your country is big, if your country is too small, you may have only 2 layers or even 1 layers of government. And this we're going to look at immediately in lecture 4. Now, because that, although today we have more space, I can see you, but I would not be able to look at your comments and so on. If you have any question, please just ask. Don't have to wait for my invitation. Now, let's look into separations of power. We're going to look at two systems. One is called presidentialism. The other one is parliamentarianism. What's the difference? There are two ways we can look at the difference. One is to ask this question, very simple question. How many elections do you have? Because we have two branches, the legislative and the executive. If you're going to have 2 elections, one each for the branches, then we'll have a presidential system. So the citizen vote in the legislative election, and that they get the members of the Congress, and they vote in the executive elections, and they get the president. So in this case, both the legislative and the executive branches derive their power independently, and therefore they can check on each other. In the case of America, the Congress may impeach the president in extraordinary circumstances, but the president can never dissolve the Congress. In other presidential systems, some presidents do have the power to dissolve the Congress. Now, let's compare this with parliamentary system. Parliamentary system has only one election, that's the legislative election. So you get the parliament here, and then the parliament would directly or indirectly elect the prime minister. And how do they check and balance each other? Parliament can express a loss of confidence in prime minister, basically say, you are fired. And the prime minister, if the prime minister disagree with the parliament decision, he or she can then seek an early dissolution of parliament to bring about an early elections. Then the people can decide which side, the prime minister or his or her opponents in the parliament, represent the majority. Is this clear for everyone? So this is first thing when we talk about presidential and parliamentary democracy, you have to ask and say, who is actually, how many elections you have? We have mentioned, related to hiring and firings of government is budget. No government can survive without budget. So what happens if the government budget is rejected by the legislature? In the case of parliamentary democracy, the moment a government budget is rejected, the government collapses. So the prime minister would have to resign and step back to let someone else take his or her place, or he or she can seek the head of state namely the monarch or the president's consent to have an early dissolution and a new election. In America, the things is a bit different. You have budget rejections. Since 1976, that means the federal government was shut down. Now, this is not something universal. No other countries, to my knowledge, has a similar provision. In America, if the Congress rejects the government budgets, then only very substantive services of the government continue to be in operation, like military, police, postal service, other things from park to museum, and then later about, say, Department of Statistics, all these things would be shut down. And currently, America is experiencing the longest shutdown ever. The second longest was also under President Trump, because he is hoping the opposition, meaning the Democrats, would succumb to his pressure or the public anger. And what is likely going to happen next, if there's no solution, American airport would have to cut down traffic. So you would have less flight. This is something very unusual. Most other countries wouldn't do so. America has this kind of system because America believes in check and balances. The check and balances would only work in the long run when parties behave decently. Now, second difference between presidential and the parliamentary system is the question whether the head of state and head of government is the same guy. Here, if you look at presidential democracy, the citizen vote them directly in, and the president is not only head of government, he or she is also head of state. Why? Because the president actually replaced the role of monarchy. Replace the role of monarch in absolute monarchy. In absolute monarchy, where you have the king call the shots, he is the head of state, and often is also effectively or even officially the head of government. So this is a case for presidential system. For parliamentary system, you would find prime minister being elected from the parliament, and he or she is only the head of government. You would have a different head of state, who is the king or queen, or a non-executive president. This brings us to the topic of monarchy and democracy. Some people think that democracy should not have a monarchy. A monarchy and democracy are simply incompatible, because if democracy is meant to have everyone equal, how can you have someone born into that high office of power? But the reality is much more nuanced. We should consider 4 political systems here. On the left is absolute monarchy. On the right is presidential republic. In between, you have constitutional monarchy and parliamentary republics. Why do I put these two together? Because both of them are actually parliamentarianism. In absolute monarchy, as we say, the monarchs control everything. And now, how do we actually get constitutional monarchy, parliamentary republics, presidential republic? You can think of them as in a sequence. Absolute monarchy, if this is, and over time, many absolute monarchies do undergo changes, transformations, or replacement. So a very gentle transformation is for absolute monarchy to become constitutional monarchy, that the king or the queen remain on top as a head of state, but only a figurehead. The power is transferred to the politicians. That's constitutional monarchy. If the country at some point decided that they want to do a monarchy, then they just replace the king or queen with a president, a non-executive president. So that's what we have in parliamentarianism. Now, if this juncture, if you can see my cursor, from absolute monarchy, you can also take a very dramatic, a radical transformation. You move immediately to presidential republic. So what happened is then to replace the hereditary monarch with an elected president. What I want to bring to your attention is the debate whether which is better, parliamentarianism or presidentialism. In the 19th century, there's this argument put forward by a constitutional thinker, Walter Bagehot, who was also the second editor of the magazine The Economist. He wrote a book called The English Constitution. By constitution, he meant political system. He said every political system has two parts, the dignified parts and the efficient parts. The dignified part is the one that excites and preserves the reverence of the population. It makes people look at the head of state and say, oh, I'm so much in love with the king or the queen. I'll pledge my allegiance, my loyalty. I'll do anything to die for him or her. The efficient parts, on the other way, is how the political system works and do the actual governing. Now, this is the government. So the dignified part is the head of state. The efficient part is the head of government, prime minister, and the rest of the structure. So Bagehot's argument is that a constitutional monarchy is better than presidentialism because you have this separation between the dignified and the efficient. People can always pledge their allegiance and loyalty to the monarch, while politicians, the efficient parts, can come and go. In presidentialism, these two are combined. So you have someone divisive like Trump. It would be very hard for someone for a citizen, American to say, a citizen to say that I pledge my loyalty and my love to the president, and at the same time, as a head of state, at the same time, I hate the president as the head of government. So this is a democratic argument or defense for sustaining constitutional monarchy. Now, let's look at parliamentarianism. In America, if you follow it, you know that their presidents is, after the presidential elections, they actually have a group of people called members of the Electoral College. These people officially elect the president. Now, most countries don't have some things like Electoral College, but in parliamentary system, the parliament is the Prime Minister Electoral College because their first job is to elect the Prime Minister and government. So how does a parliament hire a prime minister? There are three ways. One is direct elections. In Japan, that any MPs parties can nominate their representative to be elected. After the second round, if no one wins in the first round, then they continue to the second round, and then the highest priority winner will get to be nominated by the parliament and appointed by the emperor. So that's Japan. You have a direct election. Why is it so important to have a direct elections? So that the emperor can stay above politics. So we're not get dragged into this. Quite similar to that, but without such official formality, as similar to that as Germany and Italy. The head of state would appoint the leaders of the largest group or the MPs who he or she believes that enjoy majority support. What happened next is that after the appointment, the prime minister would have to go through a confidence vote in the House. That's called investiture vote. And that's make sure that the head of state's decision is accurate and up to date. In countries like UK and Malaysia, you just have this appointment by head of state. Now, why do I put the word indirect elections? Because in normal circumstances, when you have parties, the head of state would look at the parties and to see whether these parties can command or assemble a majority. Is this clear for everyone?
Well, for the indirect election appointment by head of state, the head of state, is it the king?
King or non-executive president?
All right, okay.
Yeah, like in Singapore, Singapore has a non-executive president, but we would not have any questions who will be prime minister because the ruling party has an absolute majority. But in the case of Malaysia, we used to be the same like Indonesia, like Singapore, but like in the last election, no party commands a majority. So in this case, the king would have to make some assessment.
So is the president appointed?
Depends. Some countries would have a direct elections, like Singapore. They have a presidential election because the president is more than ceremonial. Even though it's not considered an executive president, the president has some power to check on the government. But in countries like India, the president is elected by the parliament. Now, how does...
I have a question.
Sorry, Saifuddin, yes.
Yeah. Can the head of state fire the head of government normally?
Not in a parliamentary system. What happened is that you need the parliament to fire the government. And this is exactly what we're going to. I'll show you now.
Okay, all right.
Right.
Thank you.
How can a prime minister be fired? The most important ways is called confidence and supply votes. First way, the parliament pass a motion of no confidence. That's basically someone say we want to make this decision, tell the prime minister you are fired, and the parliament pass it. So the prime minister get an employment notice, a dismissal notice. Second situation is a prime minister or his or her party initiate a vote of confidence in the prime minister. So, for example, people question and say, does this prime minister enjoy the support of the people? And then the prime minister table this in order to overcome any suspicions that his government is unstable. So he table motions of confidence. But if that motion is passed, then people should shut up. However, if that motion is defeated, it's the same like you have a motion no confidence passed. Thirdly, the government loses its budget bill. Budget bill is called supply. So these trees are called confidence and supply woods. And we're going to see this again in the next few slides, because this is how a minority government can secure a survival. There's also something much more ceremonial, much more conventional, that would be considered as loss of confidence. At the beginning of every parliamentary session, beginning of the year, normally you have a speech from the monarch or from the president. Now, this speech is prepared by the government. Why do you want to have it read out by the head of state? Because it's supposed to sound like this is not partisan. This is for the whole country. At the end of the speech, you would have debate. At the end of the debate, there would be a motion to thank the government for to thank the king, the head of state, for the speech. Now, if this speech gets rejected, that's been a rejection of the government. In Malaysia, few people realize this, because we sometimes think that the royal speech is prepared by the king, and if you dare to reject the royal speech, then you have insulted the monarchy. Now, that's not the case, but this is in a constitutional monarchy and parliamentary system. This is actually the convention. In the past, there's also this possible the defeat of a major bill can also be seen as a way that the parliament expresses no confidence to the government. But this has been very rare after or since World War II. Why? Because in the past, government has so much control of the parliament. If a bill is not passed through, that would be a signal that the government cannot control its MP. However, as time passes, as politics get more fragmented, the instances of government losing bill in the House gets more frequent, and you cannot expect the government to resign every time you want to do it. The last way is actually something found in Malaysia. I'm not sure how many other countries did the same. It's for MPs to sign a declaration, a statutory declaration or a sworn statement, to say they have lost confidence in the Prime Minister. This was used in Perak in 2009, and then and continued to be used. But more frequently is that the statutory declarations by MP against a sitting Prime Minister is often also in support of another Prime Minister. So you can see this as a way that how MPs are hired by Parliament, MPs are hired in this case. But what they do is that they pass the SD to the head of state. Okay, but this has come to sort of, at least temporarily, come to an end after 2022, because the minority government was formed on the basis of party-to-party negotiation. So individual MPs can no longer in the past and say sell their votes to any prime ministerial candidate. And why is the change? Why was the change? Partly because we have had an anti-hopping law in 2022, I think just 5 days before the parliament was resolved. So when parties and party negotiate to form government, there's no room for SDs. I want to draw your attention a little bit to this defeat in a confidence vote. Sometimes this can be disguised. This can be a no confidence vote in disguise. Now, how many of you remember a guy called Ahmad Faisal Azumu? Anyone? Anyone? No. Okay. He was the former Chief Minister of Perak. In December 4th, 2020, an ardent state assembly person from his coalition government proposed a vote, a motions of confidence in him. This was a setup because this Ardun from his partner UMNO already made a deal with their enemy, Pakatan Harapan PH. So when that motion was put to vote, Ahmad Faisal Azumu found himself defeated with a huge margin, so he had to resign. Now, the first three parts, as I say, is called confidence and supply votes, and this would help us to understand how strong is a parliamentary government. The question we have to ask first is that, does a government enjoy a parliamentary majority? If the answer is yes, this is a majority government, then the next question to ask is that, is parliamentary majority established immediately after the election? If yes, means that this is a single party, a single bloc majority government. This is the most stable government, if you like. Now, if the government is formed only sometimes after elections, meaning that no party actually win a majority in the House, that situation is called hung parliament. So if somehow a few parties get together, they assemble a majority, then you still have a majority government. It's called post-election coalition government. It's still stable. Now, sometimes you can actually have minority government because of hung parliament. And they can have very different rate of a chance of survival depending on whether they have a CSA. What is a CSA? CSA is a confidence supply agreement. We have learned what is confidence supply vote. This agreement means that some opposition party pledged to the government that we would either support you or not vote against you in confidence or supply votes. If you have that, then this is a stable government. If you don't have that, of course, it will be unstable. Now, how does a confidence supply agreement look like? This is one. I think this was it was probably year 2019. Jacinda Ardern, this lady, the leader, won the largest number of seats in the House, but it was not a majority. So Labour did not have a majority. Labour reached out to NZ first. They got a majority. They have a larger seat share, but it's still not a majority. So what next? They reached out to an opposition party called the Greens, and Greens did not join the government, the coalition, minority coalition government, but Greens agreed to support them when it comes to confidence and supply vote. And they actually have a whole document, like a contract, to describe how this could actually happen. It's a deal not between the whole government, but it's between Labour and Green Party. Now, you may ask, would anyone tell me why would a party support, an opposition party support a government instead of joining the government directly? It is something hard to understand as an ordinary Malaysian, because in Malaysia, most parties want to join the government. So why so? Can anyone tell me? Anyone? No? Because sometimes parties do not want to take a responsibility in the government. They fear that their position in the governments are too different. Going in would invite the anger of their own base, or if they later have to support the government to do something unpopular, they they will get punished by the voters anyway. So you see this in other countries, but in Malaysia, we haven't seen one, except Perak. Perak, just now the case when I mentioned between PH and UMNO, they did have a CSA. That's partly because that UMNO also did not want PH to join the government. Now, this year, we have two CSA governments in Thailand and in Japan. In Thailand, this is a youth-based reformist party called People's Party. The prime minister they support is a conservative politician. Their politics are very different. And so People's Party agreed to support this new prime minister because they did not want to support another party that's former Prime Minister Thaksin's party. They did not want to join the government because they are prepared to contest against this government in the next election. So what condition they give to the government? One is that you would dissolve it within 4 months. Second, you're going to get a referendum on constitutional amendments. Whether or not this is going to happen, nobody knows, because they may bring down the government, but they can also be punished later by the voters in one way or another. On the right is Japan News Prime Minister Takaichi and the leader of an opposition party called Nippon Ishin. Nippon Ishin means Japan Innovative Party. This is a party based in Osaka. Politically, they are quite similar to LDP, central right, but they are a little bit more reformist, and also they worry that joining a government under LDP would invite backlash. So what they did is to pledge support for Takaichi. What do they ask for? They ask for two things. One, making Osaka their electoral base as the sub-capital. So elevating the status of Osaka. Two, downsizing the parliament size by 10%. This is a calculation that they believe it would benefit them. And Takaichi's more or less agreed to these two demands. Eventually, when this would happen, we do not know. Now, we come to the part on why do we need party. Party serves three functions. The first is to nominate and elect public officer. The two is to aggregate preferences and formulate coherent policy. What is preferences? Is what you like, your taste, your liking and your dislike. Now, different people have different preferences. Parties is the one that build the coalitions of voters to make sure they get elected. But between all these voters, they may be asking for different things and sometimes contradictory. For example, a party may get a support from a group who say, I want subsidized public healthcare, subsidized education, subsidized public transport. And the other group of supporters actually want tax cut. They want to save more money on themselves. This is not usual, but it's not impossible. So you have a situation like this, the party would have to find a way to aggregate all these preferences together. So eventually both groups would agree still support this party, even though they do not get maximally everything they want. The whole idea of having this role is that a society maybe with 100 types of demand could be eventually aggregated into, let's say, 5 or 6 parties. Now, the third role of political party is to connect citizens with the state to legitimize power, because otherwise people may be disconnected from the state itself. Now, are parties necessary? It depends on two things. Depends on the system. If you have a presidential system, which is very much like boxing or wrestling, it's personified. So it's possible for a presidential candidate to win election without an established party. For example, Ukrainian president, Mr. Zelensky, he won the election with a new party. And Trump basically captured the Republican Party to win the election. But remember that presidentialism also has a Congress, a Diet, Parliament, and this becomes the problem. If you do not have parties at all the members of Parliament or Congress would be mavericks. Now, they would not be able to perform effective checks and balances on the government. So we still need parties, but not absolutely necessary in presidentialism. It's just preferable, much, much more preferable. In parliamentarianism, not having party is simply not possible. Why? Because you have a country or a state to run, and you cannot have a government form when the MPs are everyone of their own boss. So you need to have parties for all this issue to be aggregated, and then you can have a government. So that's the reason why we have this. Why do I emphasize this? Because not just in Malaysia, but in many countries, people develop this dislike, strong dislike, rejections of political party, thinking that you can have democracy without parties. Unfortunately, that's not possible. Now, since we talk about having parties, and parties should be cohesive so that the MPs would work in unison. The question then is like, does it mean that all the MPs would have to follow the party instruction? Can they actually instead follow their conscience or their constituency? So we have two very famous statements here. One is from an 18th century English professor, English philosopher, come MP, Edmund Burke. He said, Parliament is not a congress of ambassadors from different and hostile interests, which interests each must maintain as an agent and advocate against other agents and advocates. But Parliament is a deliberative assembly of one nation with one interest, that of the whole, where not local purposes, not local prejudices ought to guide, but the general good resulting from the general reason of the whole. His point is that MPs are only representative, not delegates. Delegates would have to carry out the order specifically and faithfully as dictated by their principal, the voters. But a representative, in contrast, a representative would have room of autonomy to use his or her judgment. That's Edmund Burke's position. This was repeated. Edmund Burke said this before the American Revolution, and this was repeated more or less, but extended by Winston Churchill, the wartime prime minister after the Second World War. He said, the first duty of a member of parliament is to do what he thinks in his faithful and disinterested judgment is right and necessary for the honor and safety of Great Britain. In short, conscience. His second duty is to his constituents, of whom he is the representative, but not the delegates. It's only in the third place that his duty to party organization and program takes rank. And this should not surprise us, because Winston Churchill has changed his political affiliation twice, at least. To apply what Winston Churchill say, we have one government backbenchers in the party Labour called Jeremy Corbyn. In the later years, he was elected as the leader of the party Labour, and much more later, he was sacked from the party. But from 1997 to 2010, for that 13 years, as a government backbenchers, he defied his party instruction of voting for 428 times. Now, that's 34 times an average. The party never punished him by denying him, by sacking him from the party or denying him candidacy, because British parties are actually broad church. They are big coalitions, they have different people, and they tolerate dissidents to quite a large extent. What do MPs do? Before we go further, one is national interest, hiring or firing governments. Second is approving budgets. Third is enacting law. Fourth is scrutinizing governments. This is done through parliamentary questions. Sometimes we want some information from the government. You can actually ask the MPs to ask questions from you, and they have to propose the answer. And of course, MPs can do this job through debates. Now, but also MP take care of their local or sectoral interests. If they come from geographical, an electoral system like first past the post with geographical constituency, then they might be fighting for constituency development and allocation. In US, this is called pork barrel. And they may offer constituency services to their MP, to their constituents, like engaging government agency and other stakeholders on behalf of the voters. Sometimes voters look for emotional connection. They like leaders who can be with them almost in a time of celebrations and grieving, and in life occasions of birth, of death, of sickness, of marriage, all kinds of stuff. Now, how far should MPs be given the choice? Should they be autonomous? You have yes and no questions. On the yes part, the argument is they should represent their conscience or constituency. That's Winston Churchill's position. And this is a personal and local mandate. This will be very true if it's a first past the post election. And that people can also argue that when MPs are free to vote by their conscience, they provide checks and balances to the government or to their party leadership. The no answer is just basically flipping all this argument. First, they should represent their party, because even under first past the post, people most of the time still vote on your party. And if you are under party list, PR, group representation constituency in Singapore, that's clearly a party mandate. And next, if you can vote any way you like, that would cause political instability. And even for opposition, it would undermine party cohesion. So there's a reason why you should or you should not let MPs to vote freely. What about if MPs change and move to another party? Those who say yes would tell you that this allows party system to evolve. Over time, you may have some new issues, and existing party may not be able to respond to it. So we should allow MPs to quit their old party and form new parties, and so on. Second is to avoid party leaders controlling the MPs. So if an MP would lose a job for not abiding the party leader's instruction, then MPs effectively become party leaders' puppet. And if you have a majority government, then parliament would just become the executive rubber stamp. And for those who think no, the justification is that this is a betrayal of voters' mandate. And this is caused by corruption. And of course, we need to curb it. Now, even if it's not curbed by corruptions, but it just happened too frequently, this would cause political instability, and therefore they should not be allowed. So how can you stop or deter party hopping? One way you can stop the symptom. First way, through the system design, if you let the party own the seats. For example, it's a party list system or the GRC in Singapore, then the individual MP can jump, but they cannot take the seats with them. Second is to force by-election. So if you have jumped, you need to give back the voters a chance to vote. This can be done in two ways. One way is by law. You force a seat vacation. You force an automatic vacation of the seat so you have a by-election. Second is to leave that choice to voters, allow voters to collect signatures, to then decide whether an elections or should be the MP should be recalled. Third, you resolve to the problem that why would MPs jump? Often it's because that the voters don't have a very strong loyalty or identification to the party. For example, in Sabah, in the 2020 elections, between 2018 and 2020, 24 state lawmakers, that's 40%. Yes, that's 40% of the lawmakers jump over to the other party. And 17 of them went back to the old constituency to seek re-election. 11 of them got re-elected, meaning voters don't care. Voters don't care because what they see in elected representative was a human form of ATM machine. You press on the adun, you get the money. So for the adun to change seats, it doesn't matter. Now, so what you want to do then is to strengthen party base, make parties seriously commanding support. That would reduce the incentive for aduns to sit side. A successful example is in Thailand, Thaksin's party. Even though previously many MPs in Thailand would sit side when their parties get into trouble, Thaksin managed to hold on to his MPs. Now, finally, as the other way to solve the problem at the root cause is that to ask if it's corruption, how do we kill the incentive for corruptions, for hopping induced by corruption? So no fun, no perks, no selected impunity for hoppers. Selected impunities means that you get into trouble with law, and then because you now support the government just have your case withdrawn. So this party hopping in Malaysia, it has happened in two ways. One is that ideological issue, personal split. You have new parties coming out from the old parties like Amanah from PAS, Semangat 46, PKR and Bersatu, and Warisan from UMNO. And the other reason is incentive to join the government, especially federal government. Sometimes for money, may not be their own pocket, but for their constituents, because opposition's lawmakers do not get any money or the same amount of money to support their constituents, therefore risk losing support. Second is that when there's a change of government, that can actually open up the opportunities for lawmakers, for the party hoppers, to get appointment as minister or appointment to some state agency or GLC. And third one is legal impunity, that which I have explained. Now, how does Malaysia resolve this? Recall was considered, but was not widely accepted and to be taken seriously. And so the outcome was anti-hopping law. This is not an independent act, but this is an Article 49A in the Federal Constitution. What it means is that an MP would lose their job if they resign or cease to be members of the party they represent during the election. But if they get sacked, they'll be excluded. And if independent MPs join a party, they will also lose their seat. Now, how do you ensure the seats get vacated? This is left to the Speaker. The Speaker were given 21 days after being informed by any MP of such vacation to decide whether the vacation actually takes place. This means that speakers were given discretionary power, and this is problematic. We can discuss a little bit later. Just now I mentioned that you don't lose your job if you are sacked by the party. You lose your job only if you actively quit the party. So in both 2023 for UMNO and 2025 for Bersatu, you find that both parties suspended a dissident MP. In UMNO case, it's Hishamuddin Hussein On. In Bersatu case, it's Wan Faisal. Can anyone explain to me why don't the party sack them? Because in the case of Bersatu, they did sack Wan Saiful. Why did they sack one more? Anyone to try? Malaysians? No one? Because if they get sacked, they'll be free. This is how the anti-hopping law works. Now, this is what you should remember. Consideration to deconcentrate power, checks and balances, minimizing tyranny and violence, separation of power. Remember, judiciary always is independent. We are only looking at whether you have a combined or separate elections, whether your head of state and head of government is the same guy. Parliamentarianism, we go deeper into the confidence and supply agreement mechanism and different types of government in terms of their legislative strength and political stability. We finally look at party cohesion, whether an MP should be allowed to vote on conscience, to follow their constituency or by party line, and also causes and remedies of party hopping. Now, this is a quiz. I want you to look at it. And in 5 minutes' time, we come back and we discuss this. These are the 6 MPs from Bersatu. For non-Malaysians, that explain a bit more to you. These are 6 opposition MPs from this party called Bersatu. In the year before, they suddenly pledged support for the government, but they claim that they are still members of the MPs, they're members of the party. They say we are loyal to the party, but we want to get government funding for our constituents. Therefore, we pledge the support for the government. The parties are not happy, so the parties amend the constitution, saying that if you have matched, you have the party constitution, saying that if you have made such contradictory positions on party allegiance, then you will be considered as ceasing to be members of the party. And after amending their constitution, they write to them, ask them, these 6 guys, to retract your position, then you keep your job. Otherwise, by enforcing the anti-hopping law, you lose your job. So, and this case went to 3 different speakers. At the federal parliament, where the speakers come from the government party, Bersatu just lost. He just rejected Bersatu's decision, and so these 6 guys are still in parliament. The case is still ongoing. So the question to you is that should this Bersatu 6 just lose their seats? Should Malaysian anti-hopping law be tightened? Now, I'll give you 5 minutes to think, and you can take a break. And after that, we'll continue the discussion. And then we go on to lecture 6. It's a bit, if possible.
Hold on. Hello, sir.
Yeah.
So, from what I can tell, I think they should lose their seats in parliament
Okay.
because most people, they vote for the party instead of the representative. So they should serve the interests of the party rather than
Right.
the constituents.
Okay. What do you think about the anti-hopping law itself? Should it be tightened that everyone gets sacked by the party, automatically they should lose their seat?
I believe so.
In this case, they were not sacked by the party. Technically, what happened is that they have committed an offense that caused them to lose their party membership.
I think They should be sacked
Huh?
in that case.
No, they should be sacked from the House. But what I mean is the anti-hopping law is designed in such a way, if you get sacked by your party, get sacked by your party means it's a discretionary decision. You keep your seats. In this
I
case, what the party did to them is to change the rule that if making their behavior something that would cause them to lose their membership. So it become automatic. It's no longer discretionary.
I think that's fair.
Okay. So we can keep the system, right? As
Yeah.
long as they get sacked from the House. Right? Others? Brandon?
Yeah, I agree with Avisana. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. But yeah, they should definitely lose their seat
Turn
because
on your video. So in
Oh.
discussion, I prefer you to turn on your video unless you really cannot.
no, yeah, I still couldn't get this privacy thing to turn off. But yeah, I tried turning off, it just doesn't want to work. But yeah, so as I was just saying, I think they should definitely lose their seat because they were elected by the people to serve their. I mean, a party would have sorry yeah, so when they join the party, they have a same interest or a same direction for policies. And when they were elected by the people, they were supposed to serve the people by going through that direction. But if they are supporting the government, even though they are opposition, they are essentially foregoing that direction in hopes of getting funding and sort of stuff. So that way they are not directly supporting they're not serving the people anymore, but rather just yeah, I would say in hopes of getting some returns on the side. But yeah, but then if we look at the anti-hopping law, from my point of view, I think it is comprehensive enough and robust enough for not to say punish, but mitigate members of parliament jumping parties.
Right. Okay. Kahan? Kahan, you come from a state that have many cases. So what's your view?
And we have state election coming very soon.
Yeah.
My view is that it's really a chicken and egg. But thinking from the MP's point of view, if you're joining a party, that means you are buying to the principle of the party when you first join. So I will say that it's reasonable and to respect the anti-hopping law and to sack them from the positions because they are already not in line with the party. But I do understand why they want to follow the government because that's the way you get the budget and to do what you want when you call for the voters to vote for you at the beginning, right? And without the funds, basically a lot of things, there's really you can't do much. But then going back to the principles at the first is that when you join that party, you are already representing the party. And when you are not in line with the party, then who are you that in that parliament, even if you have a seat? So I will respect the anti-hopping law. And I will think that in this case, they should be sacked, from the position.
Okay. Thank you. And Howard?
Hi, sir. Well, I think that firstly they should be sacked, lose
You
their
mind
seat.
turn on your video?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. I say, would you mind turn on your video?
Oh, sure, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
So
okay.
when you're speaking, that would be better for you to turn on the video. So yeah, okay.
Okay, sure. So I think they should be sacked,
Mm.
also lose their seat, and probably they should like implement something like, you know, in football, when you have a red card, you shall lose your chances of a few rounds in a matches or something. So they shall not be competing in a few rounds of elections or something like that, because I guess for people to vote for you and you perform a hop is actually a betrayal of people's trust, and that shall be punished.
Okay. Saifuddin. What's your view?
Hi, Prof. Yeah. I mean, I tend to agree with everyone in the sense that, I mean, they should be sacked by the party. However, I mean, it's like a chicken and egg thingy, right, Prof? I mean, you want the budget, you need the budget for your constituency. If not, it's not fair, right? You are living in the same country, but your state or your constituency will not enjoy, let's say, the benefits of probably other constituencies as well. But I feel that, yeah, I mean, they should, be sacked because they are there because of the voters.
Mm.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, I mean, that's my view.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone have a different view? Malaysians or international? Kitchen? Kitchen?
Yeah, I have the same view with them because I think currently the trend in Malaysia for the people that voting is vote based on the party, but not the persons.
Mm. All right. Woon Sim? Woon Sim?
Yeah, Prof.
Yeah. What's your view?
Generally, I actually also in agreement with all the Malaysians, but I also feel that why they choose to support the government because they want something for the people. They want to do something for the people. They want that budget. So
What do you think should happen in this case?
sorry.
This is the same position with Saifuddin. I say in this case,
Yeah.
what should happen if you do not want party hopping? Because their reason is that they were denied allocation. So if you do not want party hopping, what should we do?
I think they cannot be they cannot be elected again next time. Or
Oh, you want to punish them all the way. I was actually asking you about, should government be allowed to discriminate opposition MPs? That's my question. Because you see, it's this discrimination that gives them the excuse, right? It may not be the entire reason for their hopping. Like one of the guys from Bukit Gantang actually got a big contract of 30 million. That probably is the real reason, right? But in some other cases, could be the main reason. But the whole point here is that should government be allowed to discriminate opposition MPs in allocation?
No.
Yeah. So Saifuddin, it's the same questions that I asked just now. Now, I want to, what you mentioned just now, right? The solution is actually to stop power abuse of government. Lian, I haven't seen you yesterday, I think. Lian? Hello, Lian. Okay, not responding. What about Aisha?
Yes, Prof.
Yes. Not sure whether you follow Malaysian politics enough to know what we're talking about.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not really familiar with this parliamentary thing.
Okay.
But listening from your presentation and the others Malaysian answer, I think, yeah, the anti-hopping law should be tightened because you don't want any opportunist people just move from one to another.
Okay. Thank you. And Mary? Mary? Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, for me, I think I'll go with others that they should be sacked because if you have, how you call it, if you've been elected, you're elected based on what is the time when you're running, what are the principles of the party that you are supporting. But then along the way, it will be changes like what happens to the six of them. I think if you are like a politician who have your own stand, who have, politicians should have their own principles and abide with them. If it doesn't align you, then you better just quit. But yes, we have to consider the constituency and the availability of the funds for your constituents. So I would suggest that, for me, they should lose their seats because it doesn't align with them anymore. And it's like also like what others said, is also like a betrayal of the trust. But it should also to have this in effect, it should I think that Malaysia's anti-hopping law should be tightened, like to remove any discrimination regardless of which party you are supporting the government or the opposition, so that this oppositions who have strong stand will not be discriminated and lost the funding for their constituents.
Thank you very much. I think that's a point that many of us would agree that if we want to stop anti-hopping, you want to discourage hopping, then you should not have discrimination in the first place. Leanne, would you want to try, Leanne? Okay. The issue, I want to bring you back to the Malaysia anti-hopping law. This is slightly a bit more detailed, but it's interesting for you to know. Anti-hopping law by itself is very hard to get the right balance, because if it's too tight, some of you are suggesting that you're going to even punish them after elections. Now, we know these 6 guys are likely, they change their side for some money reason, whether for their constituents or for themselves. But in other cases, if you go back earlier, like what I mentioned, from UMNO, you have Semangat 46, PKR, Bersatu Warisan. From PAS, you have Amanah. If you're going to say, stop, punish every party hoppers, you wouldn't have Party Amanah today. Right? Would we want to go that far? Because you wouldn't be able to tell people and say, I'm going to punish you because I think you're corrupt. Then I wouldn't punish you because you jump from your party because you love the people. Everyone would say, I love the people. Everyone would say, we are not corrupt, right? So that's become very hard for you to decide how far you want to go. And the current system is designed in a very, very delicate way. Part and obviously punish is if you quit your party, actively quit your party, or cease to be a member, but you won't be punished if you are sacked. What's the difference? If you are sacked from your party, means that this is involuntarily. Then you should not be punished, because otherwise your leader would have great power to first sack you and then get you to lose your seat in the House. So our law actually draw a fine line, but at the same time, they know that if the party cannot sack anyone, then the anti-hopping law become a toothless tiger. You can't bite. So what they did is actually to provide a small, to provide a way out for the party and say, you cannot sack them, but you can list out what behavior will cause them to automatically lose their membership. Then they would get removed from the House. Now, why this is so important? Because the point here is that one is discretionary. If you actively for the party to sack a member, meaning that this is a decision, subjective, it can be abused. However, if you lose a membership because of a predictable behavior, predictable outcome of a behavior, you cannot blame others. For example, most parties would charge their members, whether you're MP or not, a membership due. If you don't pay a membership due, you lose your party membership, and therefore you lose your MP's office. No one would say that's wrong. So what the party did is actually they went that far to lay down in their constituents. Can you still see my screen, right? I'll show you here. So what the party did is actually they amend their their party constitution to list down what kind of offenses would cause you to lose your membership. And you find that Bersatu is very similar to DAP. And but what happened, really the problem with our anti-hopping law is that it gives the power to the speaker. So the Bersatu 6 and also another Bersatu guy, state assembly person in Selangor, 6+1, their cases end up in 3 speakers' hands. All the 6 MPs have to deal with the federal parliament speaker who cite them because he's from the government. So he just basically dismissed Bersatu decision and the case is still in court. And you have one of the MPs from Guamusang, he was also an Adun in Kelantan. So his state case went to the Kelantan state speaker. And that speaker approved, because it's on Bersatu side, he approved it immediately, and you have a by-election. Then there's the third guy. I say that another state lawmaker in Selangor, his case went to Selangor. The Selangor speaker is from DAP. So this guy is a bit smart but pro-government. He said that the Bersatu does have a case. However, this was done in anticipations of your act. So this is sort of this is retrospective and is constructive dismissal, and use that reason to reject Bersatu decision. So my point here is that the problem we have is actually this. The speaker has discretionary power. That makes it problematic. Whether it's too tight or too loose, that's something quite subjective, as I say. There would not be a perfect position. I'm quite happy with what the position we have, but I think the speaker part is wrong. I have my analysis. If you are interested, you can have a look. Now I'm going to move into lecture 4.